My name is Kelly. For me, I've had a family member struggle with opioid addiction for much of his adult life. And I've had the privilege of being a partner and walking the road to recovery with him. My role in the road to recovery, my role was one of listener, understander, trying to understand what his needs and what recovery would look like specifically for him, trying to help him find those resources, trying to show him that there was someone to walk beside him, not necessarily to lead him because I had no experience in what he was going through or how to make him better, but just to let him know that he would not be alone, and that someone was walking that road with him to help him find the resources that he needed to get better. For him, he was blessed to have employers who understood that he struggled, so he didn't face it in the workplace as many people do. For him, family and friends do look at you differently when you struggle with addiction. Many assumptions are made. I think the biggest assumption is a stigma that he didn't want to get better. Is that the reason he was still struggling and not in recovery was the lack of desire to get better? That's not true at all. So for me, that was the important role that I got to play, is to try to understand that he did want to get better, that he wasn't still in addiction because he wanted to be in addiction and thought that was really just a great life and had no desire to get better, because it is an awful life and anyone in addiction will tell you that. So for me, trying to push past that and understand that he did want to get better and try to break down those barriers that were preventing him from getting better. For me, I certainly faced stigma in unexpected ways. For me, very well-meaning family and friends, people who cared deeply about me and my own well-being, did not understand the struggle that he was facing or that I was facing as his partner to get to recovery. So for me, the biggest stigma was understanding the difference between helping and enabling. So if you're trying to help someone in addiction and they are still in the addiction, then you're often seen as an enabler. If the person doesn't immediately get better the next day, that doesn't mean you're enabling the person. I think it's important to understand that you can help someone in recovery if you do it with wisdom, with education. For me, my faith played a big part in it because we didn't have professionals. So there's a lot of prayer and guidance for me to understand the wisdom for getting the resources and what to say and when to say it. But yeah, for me, the stigma was because he didn't get better immediately the first day, the first week, the first month. And I was continuing to walk along the journey with him, was that I was enabling the addiction rather than being a person who was trying to walk the road to recovery with him. Unfortunately, it meant there were some lonely times that there wasn't someone else that I could share my struggles with. I went to one meeting, I think it was an Al-Anon meeting, where I was able to hear some of the struggles from other family members who had been through similar circumstances. But for me, I learned that I couldn't share my struggles on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis with many people who really did care about me, just because they didn't understand the struggle, that they hadn't been in it, and dealt with that day-to-day struggle, the down and dirty struggle of walking that road with someone. People just need lots of help taking those first initial steps. I think of it like a little baby. The first steps are the hardest, and later in life, you don't need help taking a step as an adult. But as a baby, you need a lot of help to get that very first successful step. And a baby takes lots of steps and falls. And I think people in addiction will often do the same. Take baby steps and fall, take baby step and fall. But then when they finally do get to walking, it's a good success story, but it does take a lot of stumbling to get there for many people. For me, I think the biggest message I would say is that people in recovery people in addiction aren't in addiction because they don't want to get better. They do want to get better. They just need to know how. It's not a one size fits all. Recovery is going to look different for every person, just as cancer or any other medical treatment or a diet plan is going to look different based on the individual. For addiction, the recovery path is going to be different for each individual. And I think it's important that we give people options, surround them with family who's going to be there for them, and help them find the right way to get the help they need. For me, some of the best advice I read on the internet when I was going through this was to make sure I maintained the relationship. So I've often heard of tough love, and that means often distancing yourself from the person. But the advice I read from some of the articles online was that the person needs a relationship that they can count on, and they need to know that they're not going to push you away. that having at least one or several stable relationships is really key to recovery for many people. I think it's hard for someone to overcome that label of being an addict. And I do think many programs do teach people that the first thing you say is, my name is so-and-so and I'm an addict. And that becomes part of their identity and who they are. For me, one thing I refused to say was that my family member was an addict. I always say that he is someone who struggles with addiction. I always want his identity to be separate from that. He is who he is, that the addiction is something that he struggles with. It's a part of his life. It's a part of his story, and has shaped his life and who he is now. But that the addiction is not who he is. It's just a part of his story.